El Salvador. Just a few short years ago, this Central American nation was considered the most dangerous on the continent. The smallest of the three nations in the Northern Triangle, but also the most deadly, with a 2015 homicide rate above 103 murders per 100,000 people, earning its title of the murder capital of the world. We all know the saying, hard times create strong men. And this seems to be especially true in El Salvador. Their hard times created strong men, and those strong men have in turn created a strong nation. Things are looking up for the nation of El Salvador, especially with the recent re-election of their young, charismatic president Nayib Bukele to historic second term. Can this be replicated here at home? Let's discuss.
Pasamos de ser literalmente, no es una exageración, no es una hipérbole, literalmente pasamos de ser el país más inseguro del mundo a ser el país más seguro de todo el hemisferio occidental. ¿Por qué desean ver sangre de salvadoreños? ¿Por qué no están felices de que en nuestro país ya no corre la sangre que corría antes? ¿Por qué debemos morir nosotros y nuestros hijos para que ustedes estén contentos que estamos respetando su falsa democracia que ni ustedes mismos respetan en sus propios países?
Since the 12-year-long Salvadorian Civil War ended in 1992, criminal gangs like MS-13 and the 18th Street Gang have waged havoc on the small Central American nation. At the time the war ended, Nayib Bukele was just an 11-year-old boy. Fast forward to 2012, Bukele decides to run for mayor of the small town of Nuevo Cuscatlán, just 7 miles outside the bounds of the capital city. Surprisingly, the political newcomer won his first election at just 30 years old and immediately got to work bringing change. During his 3-year tenure, the city opened its first 24-hour medical clinic, a new library, and undertook an expensive and extensive water infrastructure project to finally provide clean, drinkable water to the people 24 hours a day instead of the measly 3 they had had for years. After serving 1 term as mayor of Nuevo Cuscatlán and totally transforming the town, Bukele took the next step on his rise to power, shifting his attention 7 miles away to San Salvador, the capital city of El Salvador. Here he would run for mayor next, and with that run would gain a much larger platform to implement his reforms. Again, he would repeat his strategy, building infrastructure and community centers, embracing the people, and leaving his brand upon the city. Since the Salvadorian Civil War, El Salvador has functioned as a two-party state, not too much unlike our own. The liberal FMLN versus the conservative Arena Party. During his time as a member of FMLN, Bukele diverged from his party platform time and time again, until eventually in 2017 he was expelled from the party. Now forced outside of the two-party system, Bukele's ambition to become president appeared to be a long shot, but that did not stop him. He teamed up with a minor party called Ghana and reformed it in his image. Bukele campaigned against the system. He promised to gut the establishment, not too different from how Trump promised to drain the swamp. He campaigned against corruption, as the ruling parties had made deals with the gangs. His campaign heavily focused on engagement on Facebook and Twitter, as opposed to the traditional TV appearances and rallies. He even refused to attend the presidential debates, labeling them as a corrupt tool of the establishment. Yet when election day came, Bukele shocked the nation. The FMLN candidate only received 14% of the vote, the Arena candidate 31%, while Bukele won the election with 53% of the popular vote. Now the work of taking his country back from the corrupt, violent gangs could begin. He formulated his plan and broke it up into phases. Phase 1 was preparation. The basic idea of the first phase was to just start taking back control. Bukele called for a state of emergency in the prisons, cutting off gang leaders from communicating with their men outside. At the same time, police were sent into areas that have effectively fallen under gang rule. The police investigated these areas to figure out how to disrupt the structures that allowed these violent criminal organizations to operate with impunity. Phase 2 was labeled Opportunity. Next, Bukele set the priority of preventing the recruitment of new men to these organizations, attacking the root causes that led young men to join criminal gangs. Using a $91 million loan from the Central American Bank for Economic Integration, the Salvadorian government built new community centers, new schools, and skate parks as a means of keeping kids off the streets and away from gang recruiters. Phase 3 was modernization. The plan was now to upgrade the police with the resources necessary to take on the all-powerful gangs. Again, Bukele sought to take out a loan from the Central American Bank to buy guns, ammunition, body armor, drones, motorcycles, helicopters, and whatever else they needed to prepare the nation's police for an all-out war against the gangs. Unfortunately, here is where being a third-party candidate came back to bite Bukele. The two major parties in the legislature would not approve the loan. They did not want a war with the gangs, supposedly because they had made deals with those gang leaders. On top of this roadblock, the pandemic hit, leading to lockdowns and the slowing of Bukele's plans. Then came the general elections of 2021, where Bukele went on to form a new party called Nuevas Ideas, or New Ideas. This new party did something unprecedented. They went on to win 56 out of the 84 seats in the Legislative Assembly, on their first election present on the ballot. Bukele now holding a clear majority in Congress and an approval rating of just under 90%, making him the most popular president in the world, was finally able to push forward with his plans to save El Salvador. The Supreme Court tried to stop him, claiming his plans were unconstitutional. But what good is the Constitution that forces the required suffering of your people? With a supermajority in the legislature, the dissenting judges were impeached and replaced, and Bukele's plans for a national renewal moved forward. On the weekend of March 25th, 2022, the gangs went on a murder spree, killing over 81 people in one weekend, seemingly due to their inability to make the same corrupt deals with corrupt politicians whose parties were no longer in power. In response to this, Bukele declared war on these gangs terrorizing his nation. The government went on to pass a state of exception, suspending some constitutional protections for people under arrest, leading to the arrest of approximately 70,000 violent gang members over the last 3 years. While this operation was beginning, Bukele's government simultaneously began work on another project, the Terrorist Confinement Center. This new super prison was opened in early 2023 and is now the largest prison in the world, with a capacity to hold 40,000 inmates. Many Americans and other liberal nations around the world view this as authoritarianism and somehow unjust. But would they still be saying that if it was their neighborhoods being ravaged by violent criminal gangs every day? Maybe they would, because the West hates itself. But more likely than not, when forced into a situation so desperate, they too would choose survival. The plan worked. El Salvador went from being the most dangerous country in the Western Hemisphere to being the safest one overnight. In March of 2022, El Salvador had an average of 4.8 homicides per day, whereas 1 month later it was down to 1.8 homicides per day, and now 2 years later that number is close to 0 on any given day. So what is the lesson here? If we want success, we must be willing to achieve success. And if we want to achieve success, we must do the hard things that are necessary to achieve success. Bukele did what needed to be done. He took the reins of his nation in his hands and forced them upon a new course. It is hard for any people to focus on greatness when all of their focus is forced to be on survival. Now, for the first time in decades, the people of Bukele's El Salvador can look beyond survival, and this is just what Bukele intends to do. Just this year, Bukele ran for an unprecedented second term as El Salvador's president. His focus is now to deliver on his vision for a prosperous future for his people. His vision to transform El Salvador into the crown jewel of Central America. Bukele won re-election this past February with 84% of the popular vote, in comparison to FMLN's 6.5% and Arena's 5.5% abysmal performances. In the Legislative Assembly, Bukele's party won 54 of the 60 seats up for election. Many Western countries look at this as wrong. They cannot fathom the idea of a country rejecting the division of two warring parties. They cannot fathom a people united in a common interest: peace. The reason globalists fear one party dominating an election is because globalists fear a country unified under a nationalist vision, under a president they cannot control. When globalists control both parties in a two-party system, they control everything. They do not need to fear rebellion. There is no evidence to suggest that this election was unfair. The people elected Bukele in the first place as an anti-establishment figure outside of the powerful two-party system. They chose competence and safety over the parties that have failed them and delivered decades of corruption and violence. Bukele offering a third option, more popular with the people than the establishment, is somehow labeled as autocratic by Western elites. But what they really fear is the spread of this resurgent nationalist spirit across the world. They fear the global anti-globalist movement, a rejection of neoliberal democracy in favor of realist politics led by national populist and national conservative competent leadership. Bukele has fueled these fears even more by promoting the idea of Central American reunification, a rebuilding of the Federal Republic of Central America. This would mean forming a political union between the countries of El Salvador, Costa Rica, Guatemala, Honduras, Nicaragua, and in Bukele's opinion, Panama as well, into a United States of Central America, something that hasn't existed since 1841. Again, globalists hate this, as they fear any change in the world order unless it explicitly furthers their interests, like the Federation of Europe or the Balkanization of Russia. Bukele's visionary spirit, coupled with the rampant crime that plagues most of Central America, is a formula that could actually lead to this happening. If Bukele is able to transform El Salvador from the murder capital of the world into the safest country in Central America, the people living in El Salvador's crime-ridden neighbor states may want to join in this transformation. Bukele could end up the president of this new Central American Union if he plays his cards right. Even as he's become the most popular president in the world, he is not strayed away from Christian teaching when implementing his policy. On abortion, Bukele has stated, quote, "I think in the end, in the future, we're going to realize that abortion is a great genocide that we've committed." And in September of 2021, Bukele stated that the Legislative Assembly would not decriminalize abortion, legalize same-sex marriage, or legalize euthanasia in any potential constitutional reforms. Just as he credits his accomplishments to God, so too has he honored God in his governance. He has put Christ first in his policy. This is just proof that we do not need to abandon conservative principles to win elections. We must offer people what they truly want, and that is peace and prosperity. Bukele did not run his campaign on abortion or LGBTQ issues. He ran on safety and on a prosperous vision for the future of his country. And because of that, he was able to implement conservative change. He delivers more for his people on conservative issues than almost all politicians here at home. El Salvador was once a weak nation. They went through hard times, and those hard times created strong men. Those hard times created Nayib Bukele, and Bukele made his nation strong again. We must all work to make our nation strong again in these hard times. Look to Bukele for inspiration. Hope is not lost. Nothing is impossible. A national populist Christian future is possible. Bukele's El Salvador is proof. We too can become great again. We too can become strong again. Because strong men make nations strong. Thank you so much for watching this episode of Masculinity March, a month that stands for men, a month that stands in opposition to Feminist History Month. We must become strong men if we're to have any hope in taking back our nation, and together we will do just that, take back our nation. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that subscribe button and leave a like, and check out the rest of the playlist. As always, I'll see you in the next one. Take care, God bless, and remember, Christ is King.
It's going to be only America first. America first.